Hi, my name's Samuel Findlay, and you're listening to the ACES podcast. In this episode, I have a conversation with ACES Chief Investigator, Professor Simon Moulton from Swinburne University. We chat about his role within ACES, his unique journey to study science and become a professor after spending a number of years in the Navy, his love for cycling, and much more. So, let's get to our conversation. So I'm chatting with Professor Simon Moulton on the podcast today. Simon, thanks for joining me.
My pleasure.
So how's life been at the moment? Obviously a little bit different with the COVID situation. How's things down in Melbourne at Swinburne?
Yeah, look, things are a little bit crazy. I've been working from home for about 6 weeks now, so I'm sort of over that. But you know, I can work from anywhere. And the students, look, it was good for the students in a way. They had to sort of step away from the bench, and it gave them an opportunity to sort of look at what they're doing research-wise and write the papers and write the reviews and all of those sorts of things that students sometimes don't want to do because they just want to be in the lab working. So, you know, whilst it's a real unfortunate situation to be in, I think all of my students have actually used their time wisely. But they're now starting to trickle back into the lab, so they're getting a little bit more active now in the research.
So you're an ACES Chief Investigator and a Professor at Swinburne University. What do those roles exactly involve?
So I'm the node leader at Swinburne. So I originally was at University of Wollongong when the Centre of Excellence was funded, and then I was offered a position at Swinburne and we moved down, and then Swinburne became a partner institution of ACES. And so my role down there is to basically lead all of the research activities that Swinburne are doing that meet the ACES milestones. And when I do that through having 5 PhD students down here and a postdoc, and also engaging in other aspects of ACES as well, so in communication and training and hosting full centre meetings and things like that. So I have responsibilities to the students and the postdocs and the research, but then I also have the administrative side of that as well.
So let's just jump back to your background, I guess, and where it all sort of began. Why did you originally decide to study science and chemistry more specifically?
Well, my journey to academia is probably not standard. I actually grew up in Wollongong and went to Wollongong High School and left after year 10 of high school and joined the Royal Australian Navy. So I was in the Navy for about 8 years.
Oh, wow, I didn't know that.
Yeah. So I when I left school, I had no ambitions to be in academia at all. I wanted to, I got a trade and travelled the world in the Navy for 8 years, and then circumstances changed, and I left the Navy and didn't know quite what to do, and so I decided I'd go back and get my HSC, high school certificate, and then found my way to Macquarie University, where I did an environmental science degree. I didn't really enjoy the environmental side of it, but I enjoyed the science chemistry side of it. So I did my undergrad at Macquarie University, and then my plan after graduating was to go overseas for a bit of a holiday. But my electrochemistry lecturer suggested I do a bit of a summer scholarship in the meantime between finishing and heading overseas, and suggested I go and talk to Professor Gordon Wallace in Wollongong and see if I could get a summer scholarship to tide me over before I headed off overseas, which I did. I applied, I rang Gordon and came down and had an interview with Gordon and got the summer scholarship. And that's where it all started, really, because I discovered research. I didn't really even know research existed coming out of undergrad. So I did a summer scholarship and then liked it so much, and then I applied to do my honours at Wollongong in science. I did my BSc honours year at Wollongong, and then during my honours I sort of got to know more about what this PhD caper was all about, and it was really appealing because I loved the research. And so then I applied for a PhD position with Gordon and got that, and then spent the first 6 months of that overseas in the USA working with a legend guy called Ray Borkman, and did some early work on carbon nanotubes over there when he was in New Jersey at a place called Allied Signal. Did that for 6 months, came back, picked up the PhD again, and finished it off at Wollongong Uni when we were still up on main campus. So that's sort of where I journeyed to end up with a PhD.
Well, and what trade were you doing when you were in the Navy?
So I did what they call a boilermaker fabricator apprenticeship. So I did 2 years out of their apprenticeship base out of Blacktown. I think I joined in 1983. So, I joined the Navy and went further away from the ocean than I was at Wollongong. So I did 2.5 years out there, and then I did a few years on a ship out at sea to finish off my trade. But the reason I got out of the Navy was I had a push bike accident, and so I was medically discharged, which meant that I couldn't actually do my trade. So that's why I decided I'd go back to high school and get my HSC and go down a more academic path.
So had it not been for that accident, I guess, do you think you would still be involved with the Navy today?
I don't think so. I actually sort of keep in contact through people I joined up with through Facebook, and there is one guy in our class. We had a class of 12, and there's one guy that's still in the Navy, and so he joined in '83 when I did, and he's still serving, which I take my hat off to him. But no, I don't think I would have been in. I think I would have found something to occupy my time. You can do pretty much 20 years in the Navy, and then you can retire with some sort of pension. So I probably, I don't know, to be honest. I knew I was going to do 10 years, but then after my push bike accident, the Navy medically discharged me after 8. So I sort of didn't have any option.
So you mentioned first you went to Macquarie University for that Bachelor of Technology. Why did you decide to go there rather than University of Wollongong to begin with?
Well, because I joined the Navy and left Wollongong as a young 16-year-old, I sort of was living in Sydney at the time. So when I got discharged out of the Navy, I was living in Sydney. And so I just applied like everyone after doing my HSC to do all the different courses. And the one that I was offered was the environmental science one at Macquarie. So that's why I took that. So I didn't even apply for Wollongong University because I was living in Sydney.
Okay, and then moving forward to your PhD, what was your project and your thesis about?
So my PhD was funded out of an ARC linkage grant with a company called Polar Technics that had the linkage grant with Gordon, and it was to develop a new system for cervical cancer detection. So Polar Technics were developing a electrochemical based sensor that was able to detect abnormal tissue on the cervix, and they were able to match that abnormal electrical signal from the tissue of the cervix to a different grade of tissue type, from normal tissue all the way through to cancerous tissue. So they were developing that system, and my role in my PhD was to understand the electrochemical signals from tissue in that environment, because it's a very highly mucus environment, so you get a lot of protein absorption onto electrodes and things like that, which changes the impedance, the electrical properties of the electrodes. So they wanted to actually see if they could extract the changes in the electrical signal from the tissue caused by this protein absorption, and therefore be able to sort of, grade or classify the cervical tissue better.
So you mentioned finishing school in year 10, but prior to that, did you have somewhat of an interest in science back then?
Sort of. I suppose if someone said what was my most favourite subjects at school, it would be science and then PE. So I did, and you know what? I think the reason I enjoyed science was because we had a really good science teacher back in the day, and out of all the teachers, I only remember 2 teachers: my English teacher and my science teacher, Mr. Dooley. I don't even know if he's still alive, but he was just really passionate about science. And whilst I wasn't an outstanding student, I was always middle of the road. I did always enjoy going off to science class. So I think that's where it sat. And then obviously when I did my HSC after leaving school, I think I'd been out of school 9 years before I went back and did my HSC again at TAFE. I really did enjoy the chemistry. I did chemistry and physics. I enjoyed the chemistry at my HSC level, and I also enjoyed geography. So that's where I went down that whole sort of environmental science theme for my undergrad.
Right, and it was always chemistry that you were pretty interested in after doing that Bachelor of Technology, and then being passed on to Gordon.
Yeah, it was. It was. So obviously with an undergraduate degree, I don't want to sound cynical here, but you remember what you need to remember for 3 hours of an exam. You regurgitate it onto an exam paper, then you forget it, and you move on to the next thing. And that's why I was glad to see the back of my undergraduate degree, because that's not how my brain works. If I want to retain things, I have to actually be practical and hands-on. And I think that's why when I discovered research with Gordon and the guys, my eyes were wide open to it. It was like, this is amazing. I love the fact that you had no idea what the day entailed, because you were going to start an experiment in the morning and hopefully it worked. If it didn't, you had to try and figure it out. So it wasn't all about cramming all this information into your head and regurgitating. It was about, okay, that didn't work. Why didn't it work? All right, I'm going to go and try and figure that out. So you go and have a look in textbooks, you read papers, and you go, okay, maybe it didn't. So it was a very more organic way of learning for me, and I think that's why I took to research so well. And also the people around you. When I eventually left Wollongong University, left Gordon's group, I remember saying when I left, I said, look, I started with Gordon as doing a 6-week summer scholarship, and then 16 years later I left.
Yeah, wow.
Because the science is exciting, but unless you're surrounded by really good people, it can get a little laborious. And so I think it was that magic mix of really good research, but also amazing people that were great minds and great scientists, but really good people as well. Good people you can go and have a beer and a laugh with. So it was a really good environment to work in.
So you mentioned there staying on after finishing your PhD for many years. Obviously, you worked on a lot of different projects throughout that time. What were maybe some of your highlights?
Without a doubt, the highlight would have been working with Professor Graham Clark for a few years on multiple projects. So Gordon obviously had a very close, and still does have a close relationship with Graham. And so one of my early projects after finishing my PhD was working on developing drug delivery systems for the cochlea, using conducting polymers and understanding how to make those materials, how they apply to delivering neurotrophic factors for the cochlea. And again, it was probably one of my first introductions to sort of multidisciplinary collaborative research. I did obviously have a taste of that during my PhD, being an industry-related PhD, but with Graham, I was able to go down to Melbourne and work with Graham in Melbourne, work with his team, and then some of their team would come up. So it was a really interesting project, really fascinating. So that would be, and it still is probably one of my standout highlights of my sort of postdocing life after my PhD.
So after that time at UOW, how did the opportunity at Swinburne come about?
Well, it was sort of came out of the blue, really. So not long after I finished my PhD, I applied and was lucky to get a ARC Queen Elizabeth II fellowship, a QE2 fellowship, which were quite prestigious. And they don't have them anymore. They were very prestigious at the time. So I got a fellowship for that, which was a 5-year fellowship, and I did that. And I actually did that with Gordon and Mark Cook on some drug delivery for epilepsy. Finished that fellowship, and then obviously I had a continuing appointment with the university. But then I started looking at other fellowships and started looking towards NHMRC fellowships. And Gordon suggested that maybe I have a chat to Mark Cook and see whether or not we could run the NHMRC fellowship from Melbourne Uni. And so I thought, okay, that's interesting. That may work. And so one thing led to another, and I spoke to my wife, and we thought, well, maybe a move to Melbourne would be something nice. I'd been at Wollongong for a long time, and change is as good as a holiday, as they say. So I committed to it. I wrote the fellowship and put it in through Melbourne and what have you. But unfortunately, I didn't get the fellowship. But at the same time, an ex-University of Wollongong dean, a guy called Don Iverson, who used to be the head of University of Wollongong Imrie, he had moved down to Swinburne University to be the inaugural dean of one new faculty down there. And he heard that I was looking at moving and, had a meeting with him at Diggy's at North Wollongong, and the Don made me an offer I can't refuse. And so that was my decision to move down to Melbourne, to Swinburne.
And how did you find the move down? You mentioned Diggy's there. You're moving away from the ocean to Melbourne and the city there?
Yeah, look, it was exciting because obviously with all the work with Graham and all the other connections we'd made at St Vincent's Hospital, I spent a lot of time down. I think Gordon and I spent many time going down on the Qantas link out of Albion Park for one-day meetings down there. So I was pretty familiar with Melbourne, and I knew I'd love to live in Melbourne. And also had a lot of close friends down there, Rob Capser and Etta Quigley, Mark Cook and all of those. So I knew I'd be going down to a friendly environment. So it wasn't too daunting. But, having sort of, I moved to Wollongong when I was 2 and left when I was 16. So I spent a long time there and a lot of time when I'd come back. So leaving was bittersweet, but I knew I was going down for a new adventure. And, and I was obviously going down. I was leaving Wollongong as an associate professor, and the position down there was a full professor position, so it was a great opportunity. So leaving was bittersweet, but I sort of had the best of both worlds too, because I was still part of the centre. So it was like I can move down to Melbourne, I can start my own group at Swinburne, but I don't have to leave all the connections from Wollongong, which is something I was really reluctant to do, and I didn't do that, and I still haven't do that. I work with Gordon and the guys very closely. So to me, it was just a bit of a no-brainer. And also in terms of my family life, it was about the right time. The kids were at the right age. My wife was, in her career, she was sort of looking for maybe something different. So it was almost like the perfect timing of the opportunity.
So you sort of mentioned what your current roles involve, but what would be your favourite aspect of your job at the moment?
That's a good question. But I still really enjoy being involved in the research. Like obviously, as you work through the different levels of academia and you move up to associate professor and professor, you tend to move further away from the bench, in terms of having a lab coat on. But coming down to Swinburne and starting my group down there, and having them all part of ACES meant that I had to sort of, still be involved in the lab work. So being involved with the students still is probably where I still get the biggest buzz. There's a lot of administrative stuff that I need to do and all of that to keep the work going, but it's those lab meetings and the student meetings that I have weekly, which are the most enjoyable, talking about the research, planning the research, looking at their data, trying to help them interpret their data. So again, it comes back to what got me going on this whole journey, and that was the love of doing research.
So what about life outside of work and research? What do you like to do in your downtime, and what are your other interests?
Well, I love push bike riding. It's ironic that I was almost killed riding my push bike many years ago, but I still really love just the freedom of getting on a bike and riding out. And where I live in Melbourne, 40 minutes I'm out in the bush, up in the northern areas of Melbourne, and it's just beautiful. So I find a lot of peace and quiet riding my bike. Sometimes I need a little bit of mental health check, and I use my push bike and get the Lycra on and go riding, and then have a coffee. So it's that's probably, well, that is the only thing I do. I used to do a lot of surfing in Wollongong, but too far to go to the surf in Melbourne, and the water's too cold. So push biking is a great substitute.
So this sort of ties into that question. It's something that I've asked everyone that I've had on. Do you have maybe a morning routine or something you do each and every day that helps you approach the day ahead?
Yeah, I ride my push bike to work. I could catch a train, I could catch a tram to work, no problem. But I get on my push bike, and if I go direct, it's about 20 minutes direct. But I never go direct because I use that time to get my head right about what the day holds and, planning of the day. So that's my little routine. I get up, I walk my dogs in the morning, have breakfast with my wife, and jump on my bike, and, 45 minutes I'm at work, and feel really refreshed for the day. So that's sort of my routine, and I'm really missing that in COVID lockdown. My routine is all out of whack.
Yeah, I bet. Have you been able to get on the bike much and go around the streets around town and go for some long runs?
Yeah, I still do. I try to get out at least every second day on the bike for a couple of hours and get back in time to sit in front of the computer. So yeah, I still do that. Yeah. But the fact that I don't use it as my mode of transport to my desk anymore, it sometimes is easy to sleep in.
So if you weren't doing research for a living, what do you think you might be doing?
Oh, I absolutely have no idea. I really don't. Like, when I left, I was at school. I left school, joined the Navy. I left the Navy and went into uni. So, I had odd jobs in between and stuff like that. But really, I don't know. I really don't know what I would do outside of doing this. I always tell everyone that I love my job, and I do. And look, moving to Swinburne, I did have a change in my job, because I'm now got a more traditional academic role where I have a teaching load and I have also a research load, and part of that teaching load is on the course director for Biomedical Engineering at Swinburne. And I must say, actually, being exposed to undergrad teaching has really been an enjoyable process for me. I really love the teaching side of it as well. So whilst I'm probably focused mainly on the research here in this conversation, I really love the undergrad teaching. I've had to develop a couple of subjects to teach, and being the course coordinator now means I interact with a lot of the undergraduate students doing bioengineering. So that's the new thing that I've been exposed to down at Swinburne. It's something that I really enjoy. But in terms of what I'd be doing if I wasn't doing what I am doing, I couldn't say. There's nothing really else I'd rather be doing, to be honest.
It looks like you made the right career decision then.
Oh, definitely. I do joke to people that I'm still in contact with the Navy, and I say being run over by a truck on my push bike was the best career decision I ever made.
Yeah. So, you've obviously had a very successful career in research. Wondering if you could maybe offer some words of advice for those people who are maybe starting their PhD or have just finished their PhD.
Yeah, I think the biggest advice I could take, and this is some advice that I got from a mentor who sadly is no longer with us, Leon K. Maguire, who is a legend at Wollongong.
Yeah, definitely.
And that is to take every opportunity that's presented to you, even if it makes you a little uncomfortable in terms of maybe you might have to move somewhere or you may have to go on a project. Take any opportunity, Certainly within ACES, there is more opportunities than you can possibly poke a stick at, and you get to work with amazing people. So take those opportunities, because you never know where those opportunities will take you, and it's all part. Whatever the opportunity wherever it takes you, you'll learn things along the way, and it's all what makes you who you are in terms of a researcher and just the way you interact with people. So it would be take every opportunity that comes your way, and also, don't wait for opportunities to come to you. Be proactive and get out there and look at them. And I think going, moving on from this coronavirus issue, the academic sector is going to be hit really hard and is being hit really hard. And so opportunities may be a little bit harder to find over the next couple of years. So, it's even more important to really, take those opportunities when they arise and go looking for them as well.
Yeah, well said. Well, that brings us to the end of the podcast. Thanks so much for joining. It's been fascinating to talk to you and hear your story.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thanks, Sam. I've enjoyed the conversation, and it's been a trip down memory lane for me, which is great.
Yeah, no, it's great to hear. Great to hear some things I didn't know about you. So it's been good to chat.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Sam.
Thanks for listening to the ACES podcast. For more episodes like this one, be sure to subscribe wherever it is you get your podcasts. You can also find more information about ACES on our website, electromaterials.edu.au. There you'll find links to our various social media platforms. And you can also follow me on Twitter @SamuelFindlay. Until next time, thanks for listening.